Have you ever had a quiet moment when something inside you whispered, "Don't go there," or "Call that person," or "This isn't right for you"? Most of us ignore it. We call it overthinking, coincidence, or imagination. But what if it's not any of those things? What if that soft, almost unnoticed voice inside you isn't random at all? What if this is how God speaks to us, not through thunder or lightning, but through gentle thoughts, emotions, and awareness? We are taught to look for God outside ourselves, in miracles, signs, and big unexplainable events. Rarely do we stop and think that God might be speaking through the most familiar place of all, our own mind. That quiet nudge, that strong inner knowing, that feeling of peace or discomfort that refuses to leave. This is not noise, this is communication. It is God's whisper trying to break through the chaos of everyday life. The human mind is not just a biological machine, it is a sacred space, a meeting point between the divine and the human. Yet we often turn it into a battlefield of anxiety, doubt, and judgment instead of listening. Have you ever stopped to wonder if that inner voice you ignore might actually be guiding you for a reason? How God communicates through thoughts. We fill our minds with distraction. Endless scrolling, constant comparison, and non-stop noise leave us restless and disconnected. In that chaos, it becomes hard to hear anything meaningful. But when we choose silence, when we stop running from stillness, something powerful begins to happen. The mind clears just enough for a divine presence to come through. Confusion slowly turns into clarity. Panic softens into peace. What once felt like a random thought starts to feel like direction. God does not need a loudspeaker. He needs your attention. This is where faith becomes less about religion and more about awareness. It is about learning to recognize the difference between the voice of fear and the voice of love, between the noise of the ego and the calm certainty of truth. God's voice does not rush you or pressure you. It does not shame you or frighten you. It simply invites you. It speaks with compassion and wisdom in a way that feels deeply personal, yet far greater than you. The real challenge is that many of us have been taught to doubt our own intuition. We were told that certainty must come from authority, from books, or from people who claim to know more than us. But what if God is teaching you to trust the authority within, that quiet space where truth feels real even before logic can explain it? The more you practice listening to that voice, the more you realize it is not just a thought, it is a partnership. It is divine guidance translated into human language. Do you trust your inner voice, or do you silence it before it has a chance to guide you? Understanding the voice in your mind. Maybe this is what faith truly means, not blind belief in something far away, but the courage to believe that God can reach us right here, inside our own thoughts. That still, gentle voice we keep ignoring might actually be the one voice that knows exactly what we need. The next time your heart whispers something softly, do not dismiss it. Do not explain it away. Pause, listen, and ask yourself, what if this is God trying to guide me? Sometimes the most sacred conversation you will ever have is the one happening quietly inside your own mind. We live in a world that never stops talking. Every moment, something demands our attention. Notifications, opinions, arguments, entertainment, endless noise. Then we wonder why we feel disconnected, anxious, and spiritually empty. It is not that God has stopped speaking, it is that we have forgotten how to listen. We are so used to constant stimulation that silence feels uncomfortable, even threatening. But the truth is simple. When we disconnect from silence, when we stop running from stillness, something powerful begins to happen. The mind clears just enough for a divine presence to come through. Confusion slowly turns into clarity. Panic softens into peace. What once felt like a random thought starts to feel like direction. God does not need a loudspeaker. He needs your attention. This is where faith becomes less about religion and more about awareness. It is about learning to recognize the difference between the voice of fear and the voice of love, between the noise of the ego and the calm certainty of truth. God's voice does not rush you or pressure you. It does not shame you or frighten you. It simply invites you. It speaks with compassion and wisdom in a way that feels deeply personal, yet far greater than you. The real challenge is that many of us have been taught to doubt our own intuition. We were told that certainty must come from authority, from books, or from people who claim to know more than us. But what if God is teaching you to trust the authority within, that quiet space where truth feels real even before logic can explain it? The more you practice listening to that voice, the more you realize it is not just a thought, it is a partnership. It is divine guidance translated into human language. Do you trust your inner voice, or do you silence it before it has a chance to guide you? Understanding the voice in your mind. Maybe this is what faith truly means, not blind belief in something far away, but the courage to believe that God can reach us right here, inside our own thoughts. That still, gentle voice we keep ignoring might actually be the one voice that knows exactly what we need. The next time your heart whispers something softly, do not dismiss it. Do not explain it away. Pause, listen, and ask yourself, what if this is God trying to guide me? Sometimes the most sacred conversation you will ever have is the one happening quietly inside your own mind. We live in a world that never stops talking. Every moment something demands our attention. Notifications, opinions, arguments, entertainment, endless noise. Then we wonder why we feel disconnected, anxious, and spiritually empty. It is not that God has stopped speaking, it is that we have forgotten how to listen. We are so used to constant stimulation that silence feels uncomfortable, even threatening. But the truth is simple. When we disconnect from silence, when we stop running from stillness, something powerful begins to happen. The mind clears just enough for a divine presence to come through. Confusion slowly turns into clarity. Panic softens into peace. What once felt like a random thought starts to feel like direction. God does not need a loudspeaker. He needs your attention. This is where faith becomes less about religion and more about awareness. It is about learning to recognize the difference between the voice of fear and the voice of love, between the noise of the ego and the calm certainty of truth. God's voice does not rush you or pressure you. It does not shame you or frighten you. It simply invites you. It speaks with compassion and wisdom in a way that feels deeply personal, yet far greater than you. The real challenge is that many of us have been taught to doubt our own intuition. We were told that certainty must come from authority, from books, or from people who claim to know more than us. But what if God is teaching you to trust the authority within, that quiet space where truth feels real even before logic can explain it? The more you practice listening to that voice, the more you realize it is not just a thought, it is a partnership. It is divine guidance translated into human language. Do you trust your inner voice, or do you silence it before it has a chance to guide you? The beautiful truth is that the moment you choose silence, the connection is restored. God does not need time to find us. He was never gone. We simply stopped tuning in. The invitation is simple, yet powerful. Turn down the noise. Step away from endless scrolling, constant chatter, and the addiction to always doing something. Let silence become your prayer, not your punishment. Because in stillness, you remember something sacred. God never stops speaking. We are the ones who stop listening. And maybe, just maybe, it is time to listen again. Many of us grow up believing that if something is truly from God, it will always feel peaceful, safe, and comforting. And sometimes divine guidance does feel calm, clear, and deeply reassuring. But what we do not often talk about is that God's voice can also feel uncomfortable. It can disturb your comfort zone. It may call you to do something you do not feel ready for, to face something you have been avoiding, or to walk away from what no longer helps you grow. This is where fear and faith begin to sound similar, and learning the difference becomes essential. When a thought challenges your comfort, do you automatically call it fear, or could it be faith asking you to grow? strengthening your spiritual awareness. God's voice often sounds like courage, not comfort. We often confuse discomfort with danger, when many times it is simply transformation. When that quiet, steady voice inside you says you need to tell the truth, or it's time to let go, or you were made for more than this, it is not always gentle or calming. Sometimes it is frightening, because listening to God does not only ask you to hear, it asks you to change. It asks you to release control and trust something you cannot fully see yet. This is why many of us silence the very guidance we pray for. It is not that we do not hear God, it is that we do not like what He is asking of us. In this sense, courage becomes the truest form of faith. It is choosing to act on divine insight without guarantees. When you follow that inner calling, you may face misunderstanding, judgment, or even loss, but you also step into deeper alignment, a life not shaped by fear or approval, but by truth. That is where real peace lives, not in avoiding discomfort, but in trusting that discomfort has purpose. God's guidance rarely feeds the ego. It does not promise ease, it promises growth. It invites you to face parts of yourself that need healing and to accept truths that feel uncomfortable. Growth has never been easy. It is a process of shedding, of letting go of who you were so you can become who you are meant to be. That is why listening to God can feel like standing on the edge of something, both terrifying and beautiful. It is the edge where transformation begins. From a psychological perspective, this makes sense. Real change requires emotional openness and vulnerability is where courage is born. When God's voice challenges your comfort, it is not punishment, it is preparation. He is not trying to make you afraid, He is trying to make you brave. The discomfort you feel is a sign that you are stepping into something sacred. The real question is not whether God is speaking. The real question is whether you are willing to listen when His guidance disrupts your comfort. Because God's whispers do not always calm the storm. Sometimes they ask you to walk through it. When your inner voice calls you toward change instead of comfort, will you have the courage to follow it? Real-life signs God is speaking to you. When a truth rises inside you that feels inconvenient or uncomfortable, pause before you dismiss it. That may not be fear speaking. It may be God calling you toward the version of yourself you have been too afraid to become. Sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is listen and then take one brave step forward. We often underestimate how sacred the human mind truly is. We speak of faith as something that lives only in the heart or the soul, but much of our spiritual experience begins in thought. In that unseen space of ideas, emotions, and reflection, the mind is not the enemy of faith. It is not something to escape or silence. It is the canvas where divine insight often appears. When you begin to see your thoughts as possible vessels for God's wisdom instead of random noise, something powerful changes. You stop fearing your inner world and you begin to work with it. It is easy to miss this because we are taught to distrust our minds. We see them as anxious, overactive, or unreliable. And yes, the mind can be messy. It can overthink, replay pain, and cling to control. But here's the deeper truth. The same mind that creates anxiety can also receive revelation. The same mental space that holds doubt can also hold divine understanding. The real question is not whether your mind is good or bad. It is whether it is open or closed, whether you have created enough inner space for truth to enter. God often speaks through ideas. It may come as a sudden realization that brings calm, or a feeling of compassion you didn't expect. Sometimes it's a burst of creativity that seems to appear from nowhere, or a clear solution that arrives only after you stop forcing it. These are not accidents. They are quiet signs of something higher working through you.
We dismiss them because they do not arrive with drama or noise. We forget that divine communication often feels ordinary. It feels like a thought, but one with weight, depth, and a quiet stillness beneath it. From a psychological view, this is what happens when the conscious and subconscious mind align. Spiritually, it is what happens when the heart and mind connect with something greater than the self. In that moment, thinking becomes prayer, awareness becomes worship, insight becomes revelation. This is the true renewal of the mind. Not just changing what you think, but how you think, learning to filter your thoughts through grace instead of fear. When a thought brings clarity, peace, or courage rather than anxiety, could that be a sign that God is speaking to you? Overcoming doubt and strengthening faith. When we choose wisdom instead of reaction and compassion instead of judgment, something begins to change inside us. When we start treating our minds as sacred space, we become careful about what we allow in. We pay attention to the conversations we engage in, the media we consume, and the self-talk we repeat, because we realize that every thought can either bring us closer to God's truth or slowly drown it out. The goal is not to silence the mind, but to sanctify it, to make it a place where divine truth can speak freely.
Maybe it is time to stop fighting your thoughts and start listening to the ones that bring peace, the thoughts that offer clarity instead of confusion. Sometimes that quiet, clear thought in your mind is not just a thought at all. It is God placing something sacred on the canvas of your awareness. Doubt often makes people feel guilty, as if questioning means their faith is weak. But that is not true. Doubt is not disobedience. It is part of being human. It is the mind's natural response to mystery, and mystery is often where God chooses to dwell. To doubt is not to reject God. It is to wrestle with the desire to understand Him more deeply. That inner tension between belief and uncertainty is holy ground because it is there that real faith begins to grow. True faith is not the kind that hides behind certainty. It is the kind that can stand in the unknown and still choose trust. Many of us silence our doubts because we were taught that questioning is weakness. But God is not threatened by your questions. He is not intimidated by your uncertainty. Often it is through honest questioning that He reveals more of Himself. When you bring your doubts into prayer and ask, "Is this really you, God?" or "Why am I being led this way?" you are not stepping away from faith. You are stepping toward a deeper and more sincere faith. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. Indifference is. When doubt arises in your heart, will you push it away, or will you let it lead you to a deeper trust in God? Living with purpose and inner peace. Doubt still cares enough to seek. From a psychological point of view, doubt is the mind's invitation to examine what we believe and why we believe it. It is the tension that sharpens understanding. Spiritually, doubt refines faith. It is the process through which blind belief turns into lived conviction. When we face our doubts instead of running from them, something powerful happens. Our relationship with God becomes more personal, more grounded, and more resilient. We stop depending only on inherited beliefs and begin forming a faith shaped by real experience. Many of us confuse comfort with faith. We assume that true belief should feel certain, confident, and unshakable. But real faith is often born in moments of struggle, when nothing seems clear. The times you feel most unsure are often the times you are being invited to trust beyond logic. God's voice does not always come with proof. It comes with presence. That is what makes doubt so meaningful. It teaches us to sense God's presence even when answers have not yet arrived. From a philosophical view, doubt is an act of humility. It reminds us that we do not know everything, and that openness keeps us receptive to divine wisdom.
In this space, ego softens and curiosity returns. The questions that once frightened us become tools that strengthen our faith. So when uncertainty pulls at you, do not rush to silence it. Sit with it. Ask what it is trying to show you. Sometimes the doubt that feels like distance is actually the doorway to deeper closeness with God. Faith that has never doubted has never truly listened. God is not asking you to have everything figured out. He is asking you to remain open, willing to listen. When you begin to listen to God through your mind, not as a distant idea, but as a living experience, something inside you changes. It is not only your beliefs that shift, but your entire way of living. You start making choices from awareness instead of fear. You move with purpose instead of pressure. Listening to God is not just about moments of prayer or silence. It is about how that inner dialogue shapes the way you live, act, and respond. Real listening always leads to transformation. When you align with divine guidance, life may not become easier, but it becomes more meaningful. You begin to find purpose where there was once confusion, and peace where there was once struggle. Are you willing to keep listening even when clarity takes time to arrive? Conclusion: listen, believe, and transform. When you begin to truly listen, you start recognizing patterns, lessons, and gentle invitations in your everyday life. Even your pain begins to feel meaningful because you sense it is part of something greater unfolding. This awareness changes everything. You become less reactive and more intentional. The things that once drained your energy, comparison, resentment, and fear, slowly lose their grip on you. When you can hear God in your thoughts, you realize you do not have to fight every battle. You do not have to explain yourself to everyone. You do not have to rush what was never meant to be rushed. Listening to God teaches you patience, restraint, and the quiet strength found in surrender. From a psychological view, this is what integration looks like. Your inner world and your outward actions begin to move together. Spiritually, this is what it means to live in alignment with truth. You stop performing faith and start practicing it. You stop chasing signs and start becoming one. God's voice becomes less about instructions and more about connection, a steady awareness that you are being guided moment by moment, even when the path ahead is unclear. Listening to God does not make you passive. It does not mean waiting for life to happen. It actually makes you stronger and more courageous. When your choices are rooted in divine wisdom, you stop living for approval. You stop accepting half-hearted living. You take responsibility for your energy, your relationships, and your purpose. You begin to protect your peace because you understand how sacred it truly is. The more you listen, the more you realize that hearing God is not about rare mystical moments. It's about everyday faithfulness. It's about responding to those quiet inner prompts that ask you to forgive, to let go, to speak honestly, or to begin again. It is living your faith not as a performance, but as a pattern, a rhythm that shapes how you think, how you love, and how you lead. So maybe the next step is not asking for louder answers or more signs. Maybe it's slowing down and acting on what you have already heard. Because God does not only want to be believed in, He wants to be trusted. And every time you listen and follow through, you are not just hearing His voice, you are becoming transformed by it. What is one small step you can take today to act on the guidance you already feel within you? Thank you for watching. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.